actually, I'm doing a little bit of freestyle, free ranging. Not sure exactly where it's going to go. I've got a basis, but I feel like I have it's that empty lack of anything that is part of the mental processing where it is the tortured mental deviations creating a depressive state in order to inflict permanent damage. That's why the long-term lasting effects are is to inflict permanent damage upon the victim. And what they're hoping too is it's going to be like in the future, if they see me screwed up, they'll say, "Look, we did that to him. That's how cool and that's how tough," and that's their street cred. And it's revenge, or it's the Malabute revenge, as you would, because I like I said, I pay for everything. Anything other than being the marble statue Heisman, I guess you would, or the I pay for anything anything and everything. It's just because I have a deep pockets and they're addicted to my stolen wallet. So there's all sorts of these are theories, as I would, and they come from different varying perspectives of who I might be, who I could be, or and then other people's infliction interpretations based upon societal creationistic factors. The problem is the inability. I can't really do anything because I do not have resources. I'm stuck in that Spalding volleyball as the bubble boy. I'm batted around or spiked or whatever on the basketball and constantly in a state of flux that is driving me batty as you would. And that also justifies the transfer of value into those that are deemed capable of controlling. And there are so many variables upon this. So the question is, the refusal to fix the problem, which goes back to this whole hatred of me as a person, and so the permanent marks, which are inflicted by creators, societal factory creators, whereas the original is therefore relegated to insignificant unless it is handled by a master creator, which is a bizarre conundrum, especially when the deviation, the distribution of energy, power, blood, whatever, is connected on such a vast levels. That's the problem, as I've said so many times before, is the inability to, it's like they relegate me supplying the most as the least. I can't eat anything without it attacking me and making, and then it goes back to the corrupt nature of this whole thing. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to hard sell the transfer of power as far as for me and to those that own my body. And then therefore they have to prove themselves over and over and over and over. It's like repetitive memory disorder, where you're brainwashing the public to think a certain way because of the repetitive logic basis, which then, regardless the reality of the math, and that's where we're at right now. And the problem is the supposed law got so obsessed with destroying me and transferring my power that they lost control of a huge sector of the society, which is now grown beyond their control, because they were trying to keep me smurf, shrunk, strangled, small, stunned, so they could contain me in order to be handicapped so I could play with the ball. I was not allowed to grow up. It's like if I encounter somebody, I must be respectful and stay at their level, regardless of how much that costs in my big picture scenario. So what happened was, because I was poorly raised and I played the games poorly, and I was judged harshly and by the dungeon masters, and um, in order to extract power, value, and all sorts of things, then I was shrunk down, and an inability to grow back up. So when I was shrunk down, and then you've got this one sector who's not growing any bigger, they're not properly using my power because they can't, because they will get shot by the other side, so they're forced to stay small, while the other side is growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and they've lost control. That's the craziness that's going on. It's the whole beauty shop mentality of those also that are within the variables. So you've got, like, because of the World Trade Center, which is a psychotic act, the psychotic revenge, which is on me because of the globe, because my bank has reaches into Europe, which is right there in that vicinity. I'm one of the few people that really matters to the scenario. So by screwing me and screwing Europe, it's retribution, and they're trying to, it's a bad logic, rather than allowing the system does not want, they do not want to correct the flaws of the system. So they are then, actually, the United States and the terrorists are actually on the same team when you look at it in a lot of ways, because they're both basically trying to create an anarchy revolution, and they're both attacking Europe, because by allowing this Sigma Delta Chi, Staples, Quills, sugar water world, then it's it's turning it's making a lot of gummy bears, and so Europe is not able to manage itself, and so it is being massively infiltrated on many different levels. You got the U.S. is invading with the corporate transformers and the Terminator machines and the media, and then you've got immigration from the other side who are sacred. Every sacred aluminum can matters more than anything, which is the president set by me, which is basically the worship of the electric grid system, which is not necessarily logical when you look at the big picture society, because it requires growth. And Europe needs to be managed like a garden or an estate, and not necessarily grow much bigger. Because if it grows much bigger, it's going to dilute its value, and it should grow bigger in certain sectors, but not necessarily. There's no real control over there, as far as I can tell. Europe is controlled by the U.S. as far as I can tell. They seem to follow the United States' lead, and that's because there's no strong aristocracy, or they just don't care. Kind of like the USA wealthy that are just worthless, fat pigs that won't lift a finger. They just get fatter and fatter and fatter. They have no muscle at all. Seems to be the same thing. No muscle at all. Because they're afraid if they lift a finger, then something. Yeah. And it's the worst possible time in history. They really needed to lift a finger. The more the world comes online, the harder it's going to be. It's like, they are just massive, obese, wealthy. There's no muscle at all. Their muscle is the transformers, which are going to be difficult to control because of the logic is the necessity. Yeah, the transformers they're going to lose control of the transformers, in my estimation, to the Terminators. And the stronger the Terminators grow, the Terminators will take away the control from the wealthy of the Transformers, using the law as the weapon. And I think what's going to happen is they're going to see the Transformers as a threat to the Terminators' existence. The lands are all barren. It's like idiocracy right now. They're watering all the lands with Bronto, sports drink, or electrolytes, like Planet's Crave. It's salted. Everything's salt. So it's going to be drowned water world. And that's driven by those this sugar planet, basically, which I provide. Sugar Bowl, which is a joke because they do not. Nobody really pays anything for the sugar, the global value of sugar. I mean, sure. The problem is the mutation of the system. If you think of a country like an individual, which is rather than a bunch of individuals, the individual that is the country has really bad diabetes and is suffering from a stroke paralysis right now from so much sugar and so much fat because the aristocracy refused to lift a finger. They just allow the system to run wild and crazy. And it's driven by the media. Sigma Delta Chi, I honestly think is the worst, is probably the root cause of this whole anarchy revolution. My honest opinion. If I had to testify with all my expertise in this matrix dissection, I would say Sigma Delta Chi is one of the big ones. And because the Sigma Delta Chi directly ties into, through Cornell, high fructose corn syrup, which then is used in the sugar bowl. So it's not really sugar. It's there's several levels of conflict, energy conflict. There's the sweetener wars, which I talked about years ago. Not just sugar, you've got these sweeteners. So there can only be so much sweet in the world. So they're fighting over the percentages of sweet in the world, and they're not paying anything for it. They're paying farmers who are not paying the landlords. They're paying the government and they're paying a bunch of private industry who are not managing the estate. There you go. Once again, you got a bunch of fat, worthless wealthy that don't lift a finger. They just get money collected. There is no landlords available. It's like Animal Farm. The farmers are not. They're paying off. The government does not care about the land per se. The government is more concerned about just the individualism rather than they don't believe in the whole balance of the House of Commons, the House of Lords, the Bears, the Bulls, math, plus, minus, debit, credit. The political machine seems to be playing just one side, and nobody's playing the other. They're both, it's the lose-lose, Steve Wynn plastic chip, Game Boy Matrix. Excuse me. So, then, the people that are in charge of me, they worship the political system, and then they worship, they have their certain factors they worship. And so they have, their favorite are these factors that are worshipped. So what they've done, in my estimation, is they've created the suicide bomber, which is I honestly think, driven by my sister, who is oblivious, and our inability, my body has been stolen. I'm trying to fight back, because I don't want the liability, honestly. It's like somebody used my body in a bank robbery, and I don't want the liability of having to pay back the bank or the credit card. So they run up massive amounts of debt on my body because they took my body, broke it down into parts and shares, then produced a bunch of VIP, high-ranking penthouse St. Louis King of France charge cards that could unlock any key in the world, any door in the world, and then, but they won't let me control and manage the estate, and they won't pay anything. It's like I said, when the, and I know this is very repetitive, but I got to have some sort of feeling of accomplishment in my pathetic, wasted day of a life where I did nothing. So, yeah, so yeah, they don't necessarily pay anything. It's like in the casino, in the movie Rounders, it's a bunch of rounders. They're at a poker table, and they're a bunch of sharks, and they're playing among themselves, and they just keep trading money back and forth. That's all, and that's the same thing with these communal clubs. They worship their membership, and my family gets scalped for the fairways, which gives them their oxygenated value, and also, but they don't necessarily. So it's like you've got these groups, and they will eat each other. But if an outsider tries to eat one of them, they attack the outsider. The problem is I am the bank, and I am trying to recoup the money that was taken from my estate by digesting some assets into my estate. It's not like I have a proper, my estate is being looted and pillaged. It's not near as attractive as it was in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, or 80s. It's really gone downhill because of when the guilty realize, we're guilty, they rapidly, that's why Louisiana was massively polluted with plastics and trash. They trashed, rather than turning Louisiana into like France or Italy or San Francisco or Northern California, they turned it into a trash heap dump. Just a bunch of trash. And they used Baton Rouge was the main weapon in that. So Baton Rouge was attacking the state, and then my body was used to decimate and all those sorts of things. So I'm trying to recoup some asset value from those that have scalped my estate in order to control the estate. It would be better in the big picture if they would let me either partake, but they get nervous. It's bizarre. The wealthy are proud and they're nervous, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. So they do not want me to eat anything of substance. I have actually been locked out, and the poor are actually poisoning me they want to make me as small as possible. It's like, because Gulfstream is in Savannah, and there's a bunch of, and for the wealthy people, the poor have kidnapped me. And they bribe a lot of politicians, they bribe a lot of military, they bribe a lot of anything and everything. And they kidnap me and make me po' boy reverend, but in actuality, my estate is being looted and the back door is open. So you got there. It's basically, this whole reverence is just a scam to loot my estate. They're embezzling. And they force me into these scam rank schemes. And that's why they use the law as justification for these scam rank schemes, to keep the back door open so they can loot the assets. And that's why Louisiana is doomed. And I actually have the global estate. I could probably, if I built a competent estate in Louisiana, I could utilize France, Italy, Latin America, potentially some parts of the Middle East, like United Arab Emirates. But I'm not allowed to, because they do not like my brand of, well, what it was is they tried to make an example of me. They don't believe it. They wanted to make the extreme example, not like English barristers, not like aristocracy. They had to be. They wanted to make an example to be reverent. So at the key technological dawning age time in history, I got whacked and sabotaged, and so therefore I was unable to elevate and compete while everybody else was waking up. They kept me locked down in bed. They were locked down in the cellar. There's Vampire Reverend for Anne Rice, Vampire Louis Beauty Shop, or any number of excuses. There are so many excuses used to justify beating me into the cracks of the system, into the dungeon. So yeah, I honestly think my kidnapper, or those that are controlling my body and my estate, do not care. They have obviously serious brain damage. They do not have the mental capacity to care because they're guilty. They realize they could lose it all real easy. So that's brain damage. That drives their inclination to worship the current agenda of the political and the economic system. So therefore, that's why they have forced us to be suicide bombers as reverends. Because as a bribe to the politicians and a bribe to the business sector. They're using the Sigma Delta Chi as the water world sugar bowl poison, killing all the bears globally. And what it's done is it's basically just they're erasing borders. Borders do not matter because of individuals. It's like in Lord of War. You've got Jared Leto, and he has done an outline of Ukraine and cocaine. That's a very true context of what's going on. They do not believe in borders. They're chopping it up, the borders, into the Coca Bush political party machine. There's no lords, territorial governors under the crown or anything like that. It's all controlled by the individual machine individuals who do not have enough. They don't have a big picture perspective to manage a global estate. So they do not care. All they care about is inflicting their ideology upon other parts of the world to validate their existence as a defensive mechanism, risk management as an offensive defense mechanism, because they do not like competition, because they realize their math is flawed, especially now with how poorly the deficit has been run. So that makes it even harder to, they will fight to the death any sort of alternative governments as far as being just, seriously. I mean, it's really gotten that bad because there could be liability issues and things like that. There's always going to be a political machine system, the necessity. The problem is there are totalitarian dictators who want to wipe out everything. It's not a communist party because they're like the nice guy, hippie commune party. And the wealthy think they're driving this machine, but in actuality, the wealthy are going to be slaughtered as soon as the machine gets strong enough. And I feel bad for all sides. I'm playing the banker in here. I'm just being the correspondent because I feel bad because I know the poor are just trying to eat. The minorities are just finally getting a place at the table, and I'm looking like the bad guy, which I'm being forced to look like the bad guy because I could have built bridges and fixed the problem, but they forced me to look like the bad guy by having to try to, and so they realize it. They're not, the populace is not stupid. They see this. So you've got these certain wealthy that want to try to usurp. They're fighting over percentages. They're hardball negotiating before they won't even let me in the door, but they're torturing me to lose percentages, which is crazy because they're losing a lot bigger percentages on the big grand scheme of things and at this vital time. So greed is really, really bad for those that are locking me out right now, especially those that are not managing the estate properly, especially because they're going to lose control of Europe through, I honestly think what you're going to see is, I think you're going to see the wealthy, and I wrote a book years ago about, it was kind of an Ayn Rand similar scenario where the wealthy, I'll move to one particular part, and the wealthy and the smart. And it's the only, eventually the political machine has got to correct itself. I mean, fracking saved them for a while. Fracking saved the oil crisis, but you've got a bunch more crises that are on the horizon, and they just wanted to party as long as possible. Praise on my exploded McKinsey there. So yeah, suicide bombers, for those that worship Bush, that are forcing my family to suicide bomber, and they're also forcing Europe to suicide bomber and allow see, that's where the Muslim terrorists are winning. The Muslim, and I'm not against, the problem is, what I think is you need to fix the problems of the country. And so you've got the Muslims are invading Europe right now. And they're going to mutate the level percentages of the population. So that's one of the sides that the U.S. is playing with the Sigma Delta Chi as a revenge for the World Trade Center, except they're helping those that are bomb the World Trade Center. So they've got to attack me, is because they realize they're actually helping the terrorists for this world water world. So the terrorists are Persian cats. So they had to turn me into the big dog, and they're going to turn Europe into a bunch of big dogs. The chows, as far as you would. The Bush Beauty Shop chows of Italy. The Mediterranean Riviera Country Club chows. They're scalping for fairways, but they need some more. So yeah. And then I guess they think beauty will save them in the future once genetic engineering takes hold. That's going to be because beauty did not save them. So because they would not allow me to, because they were greedy, and they had to maintain control. And so then you've got beauty's going to save them in the future with Gattaca sort of scenario. That's the only thing I can figure that they're playing for. Because they're just giving and giving and giving and giving and giving in order to allow these transformers to grow bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful, which they are not going to be able to control. And I guess they think money, I don't know, if they can maintain control of their wealth. But I don't see how it's going to happen. I think they're going to lose control of the wealth, honestly. I think you're going to see them lose control of the wealth. This doesn't make any sense. I think you're going to see, it's bizarre, but yeah, that's why I think they have to go someplace like Alaska or Canada or the United Kingdom. But London is now 50% non-English population. So they're gonna lose control of London. So I guess they're gonna move to the Midlands. Well, there you go. Once again, that's yeah, I guess it's going to be. They're gonna move to the wealthy, are all gonna move to the Midlands or to Scotland, I guess, for the time being. And it's just gonna get. That's the only because France warned over the 75%. They could move to Russia. Russia might welcome. I don't know if Russia's going to welcome the American wealthy. They could move to Alaska. They could do like Larry Ellison, who bought one of the Hawaiian Islands. A bunch of wealthy might move out there. They could have helped me with South America and had a lot of options there. And I guess they're going to try to usurp. They want to cut me out of the deal because they're crazy, fucking stupid, and they're greedy. And they think they're playing hardball, so they're going to try to cut me out of the deal. They could have made it Louisiana an option, but Louisiana is lost to the plastics factories, completely lost control of Louisiana. I don't know. I mean, if you look at California, you look at Texas, look at California and Colorado, those are kind of the future. Asia is going to have to start looking broad. So you know Asia is going to go heavy into South America. South America is an open territory. There's no law, no rule there. Canada is being fought over right now. Europe is going to continue. As long as you can't allow the Sigma Delta Chi to rule the world, Europe is going to just keep getting worse and worse and worse. They pulled all their teeth, so now they just have to, they're like whales and krill, I guess. That's the only thing that can matter. And eventually they're going to lose control of the voting, and that's eventually going to turn in, I guess, like France, 75% tax on the wealthy. Switzerland? I don't know. You know Switzerland's going to be invaded. The Scandinavian countries? I don't know. Russia. Russia was the key. The U.S. played it. U.S. wrath and revenge is going to be remembered as one of the key. Honestly, I think when you look at, that's why that show Revenge is there. When you look back at history, and Pope Ratzinger, wrath and revenge of the is going to be one of the key one of the key deadly sins, and I honestly think that's going to be what's happening here. The Middle East has to sort of grow up to a degree. I don't know what to do about that. I mean, I wouldn't even want to open that can of, that's difficult. Hopefully the UAE and Saudi Arabia will help evolve to a certain degree, but I think you're going to see a lot of investment in Africa from a lot of different places who are shopping Africa for the resources and the future growth potential like they do with Latin America. Who knows? That's my only. But yeah, eventually the immigrant. It's like if I would have been allowed to evolve with Louisiana, Mexico, we could have done something with Mexico. So then there would not be the Mexican necessity for all of this immigration. But instead, it's this individual wealthy greed, which is much worse in Mexico because they can get away with it a lot more than there. And so the individual greed of the wealthy in Mexico, I'm not allowed to play with. I can only play with the cheap meat. Got to keep me separated. Keep me in the poor. Cheap meat is reverent for Jesus. You know, these Jesus freaks are the biggest sham in the history of the world, to be honest with you. The whole Christianity thing is one big nasty racket. This whole forcing me to be reverent to the poor is one of the dumbest criminal enterprises in the history of the world, literally. So yeah, we could have evolved Mexico economically, but that was that. I think that's why they chose the path they did, because they did not like competition. Then Mexico could have been competitive, which would have been, you know, they wouldn't have the immigration. They might have had the economic competition, which is even more scary. I think to the U.S. is economic competition from Mexico and Latin America is a lot scarier than immigration. Immigration is just a bunch of that doesn't scare them near as bad. But yeah, if Louisiana would have evolved into a strong Catholic aristocracy like St. Louis, King of France, said it was supposed to, then Mexico evolves. So then when Mexico evolves, Latin America evolves, hopefully you see some of the similar rising of the Middle East to where it happens. But so far right now, you've got this individual, the wealthy are just dropping the ball left and right, and there's no strong aristocracy. And it's, I'm guaranteed, you blame it on the Sigma Delta Chi is the key. I think it is the worst thing in the history of the world. Well, it was great for a while, but they went way past it. Overboard. And just way overboard. I mean, they've got to cut it off. Fix the problem. You know, don't just keep allowing this mass migration because the melting pot mentality, which is good in the United States, but not good in certain parts of the world. Not great in Europe. It's not necessarily great in the Middle East. Not necessarily great. That's why Russia had the Iron Curtain, was to avoid that. Eventually, because I think you're going to see, once you have a genetic engineering revolution, genetics will matter. So right now, they're just muddying the waters, as you would, to a degree. And I think the United States fears the genetic the genetic engineering revolution, and so they want to muddy it up as much as possible as far as handicap. So right now, I think that's the genetic engineering revolution, which is the beauty that's going to save them. I think they think that is why they're also allowing Europe to be inundated by pulling teeth, gummy bears for the sugar bowl, sugar water. It's my only interpretation. Like I said, I'm just an interpreter. I was concerned about Louisiana, Latin America. I don't really want to get involved, and I'd like to have some property in the Middle East, but yeah, that's not my concern. Europe is my concern. Italy, Spain, France, Switzerland, and other parts to a degree. I'm not able to manage them, and I called for years and years ago the rise of the aristocracy. We needed some principality governors to rise up and manage the lands, but they did not. That's what is necessary. Otherwise, it's just going to be mass chaos, brawl, sprawl.